Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and excellencies. A very warm welcome to respected Dr. Karan Singh, who is not only a renowned statesman, but also the greatest authority on India's culture. It gives me so much pleasure to welcome all of you on behalf of India Habitat Center and Professor Benoy K Behl. In 2014, the Japan Foundation gave a fellowship to Professor Behl, which helped him to take further his ongoing studies and documentation of Indian deities worshipped in Japan. Since then, Japan Foundation have held the exhibition of Professor Behl's photographs of Hindu deities in Japan many times in Delhi and in metro cities across India. His Excellency, the Acting Ambassador of Japan, inaugurated this exhibition when it was held at the Rashtrapati Bhavan Museum in 2017. These exhibitions were covered by national newspapers across India, including on the front page of the Times of India, New Delhi. Professor Behl's film, which you will see today, was very kindly sponsored by the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. It is highly appreciated amongst Indian documentaries. This is a unique film. In the words of the former Director General of the Japan Foundation, New Delhi, Mr. Kaoru Miyamoto, it includes shooting done in the interiors and shrines of many important temples of Japan, which are not open to the public. It is said that Professor Behl's pioneering research of this subject has made a very significant contribution to India-Japan cultural relations. Ladies and gentlemen, Benoy K Behl speaks to us today on Indian deities and Sanskrit in Japan. Thank you for your attention. Over to Mr. Behl now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies. My grateful thanks to respected Dr. Karan Singh. It's wonderful to have his gracious presence with us on this occasion. He is indeed the greatest living authority on India's culture. He has also been munificent in his warmth and his kind appreciation of my humble efforts over the years. Thank you so much. My grateful thanks to the Japan Foundation for having given me the opportunity to take further my research on the subject of Indian deities in Japan. I'm deeply grateful to the Ministry of External Affairs for their kindness in sponsoring this film, which brings to you this subject in a compact and visual fashion. Ladies and gentlemen, the travel of ideas is a seeming miracle in the story of man. The travel of ideas about life across vast oceans and over high mountains underlines the sameness of the human condition everywhere. And perhaps there is no greater example of this wonderful travel of ideas over long distances than the ideas of Buddhism and of Indian deities and Sanskrit, all the way from India to the Far East to Japan. How many are aware that a score of Hindu deities are worshipped actively by the Japanese people till today, including Saraswati, to whom there are literally hundreds of temples across Japan. As a matter of fact, Saraswati is not only worshipped in Japan in the form in which we know her today, and represent her today, playing the veena as the embodiment of the higher qualities of the human intellect and creativity. But she's also at the same time remembered in Japan for her association with water. You would recall that Saraswati is a personification of the great river Saraswati. So there are scores of temples to her in Japan which show her playing the veena. In fact, the most important lake of Japan is named after her veena, which is called Biwa in Japan. And at the same time, she is worshipped as water. There are shrines to her which are in pools of water, and Saraswati is remembered in that form too. In fact, the Japanese people remember and worship actively some deities that we do not think about so often in India, such as Vayu and Varuna and Yama. There are so many temples to them in Japan. And it's quite wonderful to see the Homa or havan of the Indian tradition called Goma in Japan, which is performed every day and very often more than once a day in more than 1,200 temples in Japan. And the Homa is performed, the Goma is performed with the chanting of Sanskrit hymns. And these Sanskrit hymns are chanted by people, by priests who may not know how to read Sanskrit. How was that made possible? This was made possible by the fact that the Japanese alphabet, kana, was created on the phonetics of of Sanskrit to make this possible. These are the amazing facts of how close the relationship has been between the cultures of India and Japan. As a matter of fact, the priests have in their hands a book which gives the Sanskrit of the chants, and simultaneously it gives the phonetics of the chanting in the alphabet of Kana. Absolutely amazing. And the script of Sanskrit is the 5th, 6th century script of Sanskrit called Siddham, which we have largely forgotten in India today. But this script is preserved in Japan. As a matter of fact, the only place in the world where you can learn Sanskrit today in the Siddham script is in Koyasan in Japan. Also, the script is revered by the Japanese people. It is considered sacred, and every home in Japan practically has in its shrine, in its prayer room, the Sanskrit script, which is worshipped. This is the Bija Akshara, representing so many temples of Japan. So this is the marvelous story of how close the cultural interaction is between the Japanese and the Indian people. And most importantly, it is a sharing of the ideas about ethics, ideas which take us beyond the realms of the material life, ideas which take us beyond our daily cravings and material needs, the ideas of the meaning of life, the ideas which transcend the humdrum, the mundane qualities of daily life. So while we live in this world occupied with so many desires. These are the ideas which help transcend these desires and take us to a plane where we may be able to find the meanings of life. These are ideas of kindness, goodness, ethics, the ideas of giving, the joy of giving, which fills one so much that it leaves no space for the feeling of pain. These are the wonderful ideas which are so deeply shared by the people of Japan and India. My colleague and partner Sujata Chatterji and I have immensely enjoyed our trips to Japan and have been helped so much in the exercise of putting together this film. In fact, when I was first planning the making of this film, professors in the USA and other friends of mine warned me to be prepared for disappointment because the Japanese chief priests and the Japanese temples do not open their doors to uh, interviews and to the shooting of deities in their temples. So I was well prepared for that. When I wrote to 50 of the most important temples of Japan for their kindness in permission to shoot their deities as well as interview their chief priests. At that stage, I would have been very happy if 4 or 5 would have agreed, and that would have been enough perhaps to make a convincing film on this subject. However, all 50 of them said yes and cooperated enormously. Of course, they were very kind to me also because 100 temples of Japan have held my photographic exhibitions on Buddhist heritage. But more than that, much more than that, it was their kindness to appreciate the sincerity with which I was approaching the subject. For the Japanese are marvelously uh, sensitive to sincerity. The truth can be altered, the truth can be perverted, the truth can be lost if one's intentions and if one's attention and is not accurate and complete. If one's sincerity is not altogether there. And I'm deeply grateful to these temples and their priests for so kindly appreciating the honesty with which I was approaching the subject. So this unique film was made possible by them. I must also share the experience that this film was also made possible and was also a glorious experience because of the Japanese people. Dr. Mihoko Hiraoka helped enormously in the making of this film. And when I was planning my shooting in Tokyo, Swami Sitaramanandaji of the Shivananda ashram, an acharya of the Shivananda group, wrote to Ms. Keiko Ito in Tokyo to suggest if she may help me with the shooting. Now, Keiko is a very, very senior interpreter and translator. And I could never have afforded a person like her to take on professionally to help me in this task. But she gave up all her work for a couple of weeks. And from early morning till late evening, she was right there in the spirit of karma yoga to help us do what we had to do. As a matter of fact, even when she went back home at night, she would continue her research about the particular temples which we had visited and the accuracy and kindness with which the work was done is something which only the Japanese people can do. They are absolutely wonderful when they are involved in their karma yoga, the yoga of action for its own sake, without any material rewards. They're absolutely wonderful. And so also the young yoga practitioner Chisato Nakayama, who came in from North Japan and enormously and very kindly helped in the shooting which was done in Kyoto and Nara. Truly, truly, this film was a blessed experience and a great living example of the warmth and sharing of culture, which could be so inspiring to all the people of India and Japan. And of course, every single day spent in the shooting was enveloped by the kindness of not only the priests of the Japanese temples, but also every person we met on the street. There's so much kindness, there is so much warmth, there's so much courtesy that it's a wonderful experience to be in Japan and to work with them on a subject of culture. So, ladies and gentlemen, uh, with my many thanks to the India Habitat Center for holding this screening to share these thoughts and this film with you. I take great pleasure in sharing this with you. After the screening, I would be requesting Dr. Karan Singh, respected Dr. Karan Singh, to please speak about his response to the film and the subject. And then I will also talk to you and perhaps answer questions which you may have. And Sushant, I would request you to please screen the film now. Thank you.
Along with the ideas of Buddhism and Hinduism, the culture of Indian deities traveled across the whole of Asia.
Very interestingly, more than 80% of Japanese gods are originally Indian gods.
This close relationship between the people of India and Japan has not been known to most people. Well-researched books on the subject are also not available.
Most of Japanese don't know. For example, I live in Kichijoji, in the outskirts of Tokyo. This Kichijoji literally means temple of Kisho goddess. And Kisho is originally Lakshmi. So thus, I came from Lakshmi town. This should be recognized by Japanese people, the bottom of Japanese culture. Indian culture is very strongly imprinted and developed in the Japanese way.
The Todaiji temple at Nara is one of the oldest and most revered temples of Japan. The 48 feet high Vairochana here is the largest bronze statue in the world.
Already in the 8th century, Indian Buddhist monk named Bodhisena has arrived to Japan, and he inaugurated the eye-opening the ceremony of great Buddha of Todaiji Temple in 752.
Bodhisena and Buddhasthira, they then went to a temple nearby, Dayanji, where they started the teaching of Sanskrit in Japan for the first time.
When the Japanese studied Sanskrit in the 8th and 9th centuries, Sanskrit was synonymous with the Siddham script. This was used for writing Sanskrit since the 5th century in India.
Thus, Japan and India was very closely connected. If you go to Japanese tomb, you may find sit-down letters. No Japanese can read these letters written on the tomb timber. And again in Japan, there is a Koya-san temples. In this Koya-san temples, they have still sit-down Sanskrit the school. Many monks are learning this Sanskrit, but the Sanskrit is sit-down letters. So perhaps Japan is a time capsule of Indian culture. Already India disappeared.
There is a deep relationship between Kana, the Japanese alphabet, and Sanskrit. The Japanese wrote Sanskrit through simplified Chinese characters which developed into the Japanese alphabet, Kana.
And this Japanese, the alphabet pronounced A, I, U, E, O, like Sanskrit, exactly as the Sanskrit.
In Japan, they also use the Indian letters for writing of sacred syllables or bijaksharas, which have the power of mantras. Every Buddhist monastery in Japan has a seal in which there is a bijakshara, a sacred syllable, as a short name of the monastery. There are some words in Japanese which are derived from Sanskrit, like O Seva, from Seva, service. And there are about 100 Sanskrit words which are used in Japanese.
Most of the Japanese, they are using that, but without knowing that that is the originally from Sanskrit. Suppose like they call the Buddhist temples at Thera. Thera means it is from the Pali term Thera, means a Buddhist monk, a bhikshu having 10 years experience.
In the words of His Excellency Mr. Yasukuni Enoki, as I come from the Japanese Lakshmi town, it is no great surprise to me to find that Japanese life is full of so many Hindu deities. Japanese people are unaware of their origins. One of the most revered deities of Japan is Saraswati. There are scores of shrines built to her. In many ways, the original concept of Saraswati and her association with the natural order and good fortune are very well preserved in Japan. She is often visualized as a sacred body of water. In Japan, we find the continuance of so many early ideas of Indian philosophy. The annals of the Todaiji temple mention that the celebration of the worship of Lakshmi and Saraswati was held for the first time in this temple in 722 AD. Ever since, it has been an annual celebration. In 1836, Saito Sachio wrote a guidebook to the Edo area or modern Tokyo. Saraswati was mentioned as the most popular deity here at that time. In 1934, Lady Chiben Sonyo felt that she had become an incarnation of Saraswati. She started writing in Sanskrit, though she had never studied the language. She founded the Benten Shu, Saraswati sect. This sect holds water as divine, as it is the abode of Saraswati. We are reminded that Saraswati is the personification of the great river which once flowed in India. Benten Shu also worships her to bestow eloquence and learning. Worship of Lakshmi was done to ensure the peace of the land, wind and rain in good season, good harvests, joy of the people, and the good of all sentient beings. The great intellectual genius of Japan was Kukai or Kobo Daishi of the 9th century. He learnt the Sanskrit script from the Kashmiri Acharya Pragnya. Kobo Daishi placed emphasis on a knowledge of Sanskrit. He said that the Japanese have had to rely upon translations to study Buddhism. However, the true words in the original language are exceedingly important. Every word has a profound meaning.
The Japanese people use Sanskrit when they pray. Suppose in Sanskrit they say, Om Saraswati Swaha. In Japanese it becomes Om Saraswati Ke Swaka. In Japan, they are preserving the old Indian tradition because they are following the ancient scriptures. They are also doing the puja and the mudras as well as the sadhana. There is nothing called Japanese or Japanese elements in these. It is the Indian Buddhist Tantric tradition.
The Vajrayana Buddhist traditions of Japan trace their knowledge back to India, to Nagarjuna and other great acharyas of the Nalanda University.
Nagarjuna is known as Gujio in Japan. Without his teaching, the Buddhism of the Great Vehicle would not have existed.
The Lotus Sutra is a major spiritual creation with a profound impact on life in Japan. It was translated from the Sanskrit by Kumara Jiva 1600 years ago.
This is a temple that follows the Lotus Sutra. The sutra is originally from India and goes back to the teachings of the Buddha himself. It started from India and came to Japan.
A temple is dedicated to the deity Indra in the Shibamata area of Tokyo. It is a most important Indra shrine today.
長栄山大教寺のご本尊でありまして
This temple has 200,000 visitors on the new year alone. There would be about 2 million visitors every year.
1629年
Varuna has been worshipped in many temples in Japan to prevent droughts, typhoons and floods which occur often in Japan. A shrine was dedicated to Varuna in the Fudodo Sanctuary in Tokyo in 1836. The temple also has a representation of Kamadeva. He is worshipped by many young couples. There are many temples dedicated to Yama in Japan.
The sound of the word Yama became Ema as the name traveled and came to Japan.
に変化したと言われています。
It is the most ancient temple to Lord Ganesha, which has been in use for the last 1,000 years. And young boys and girls go there to be successful in their courtship. The merchants go there to gain success in their business. The oldest, which has been continuously in worship for the last 1,000 years. And I don't think anywhere in the world we have a temple to Lord Ganesha who has been there in constant worship for the last millennium.
In the 7th century, Prince Shotoku created the nation-state of Japan after vanquishing his rivals. He took the term Tenno for emperor from Sanskrit texts.
And at the same time, he also wrote down a constitution for his country in 17 articles. Article 3 of the constitution clearly points out that the constitution is being based on the three Ratna, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. It is the first Asian constitution ever written. Important point is that its consecration was done with a Sanskrit text which is called the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani.
The Sanskrit manuscript used for the consecration of the constitution would have been obtained from the Hindu kingdom of Champa in Vietnam. Havan or Homa continues in Japan, where it is called Goma. Goma in the Shingon and Tendai Buddhist sects of Japan has striking parallels with early Hindu rites of Agni worship. There are also deep similarities with the later Tantric tradition. The havan is perhaps conducted in Japan at least as often as in India. The Tantric Shingon school of Japan sings Sanskrit hymns. To this day, followers of the sect perform their worship in 1,200 temples throughout Japan.
またいろいろのこの
Esoteric Buddhism is from India, and the big philosophy of the universe is, of course, from India.
インドから伝わったあれでございまして。
Vajrayana Buddhist worship in Japan is similar to Tibetan Buddhist worship. However, the Japanese tradition has preserved some early Vajrayana rites. A study of Japanese Buddhism helps to fill some gaps in our understanding of the development of Buddhism.
一応日本の不動明王の
There are 4 types of Shingon mantras or Fudo-myu in Japan. These are the mantras used in Japan which are not in the Japanese language. They are taken from the Sanskrit language of India. In Sanskrit, Fudo is called Achalanatha. He seems to have his origin in the Hindu deity Shiva. The Mu is called Vidya Raja in Sanskrit. Here, it can be safely stated that Fudo-myu has his origin in the Hindu deities of India.
A sutra compares the cosmic force of the mantra with the mighty roar of a rising flood. The mantras were transcribed into ideograms, and to conserve their full power, they were also written in Siddham. Indian letters to a Japanese are sacred and stand for divine beings. To this day, the Japanese write mantras in Siddham.
This booklet contains prayers in Sanskrit that are commonly used in Shingonshu or esoteric Buddhism. It is written in Japanese, but the mantras are in Sanskrit. It is used in many ceremonies in Buddhism. Priests learn the intonation and how to pronounce it by using this booklet, which has Sanskrit and also has Japanese letters to convey the sounds of the Sanskrit words.
今言われましたようにね、ここは
Every god has his own Bija Akshara. People also worship that Bija Akshara. Every temple gives much importance to those Bija Aksharas because they are equal to God.
いろんな仏様、神様。
スタンプを押すその
Visitors bring an album. We call it Shinchin. The visitors go to various temples and collect these Siddham stamps in the albums. These albums are like holy books for the people.
ペーパーになってるのがありまして、
私たちは禅寺ですのでね。
We belong to a Zen Buddhist monastery, and we strive hard to sever the bond of birth, senility, disease, and death. The bond which is the cause of all suffering. As the Buddha said, desire is the root cause of pain in the world and should be overcome. This forms the basis of our ascetic practices, which come down to us from the Shakyamuni himself.
Bodhidharma, he transmitted Zen. Zen later has been transmitted to Japan also, and it is one of the most important sects in Japan.
Mists surround the legend of Bodhidharma. Tradition points out that he was a prince of Kanchipuram in South India. The Japanese form of his name is Bodai Daruma. It is very close to the Tamil form, which is Bodhi Daruma. Zen was introduced in the 6th century. It was a wordless tradition, directly pointing to the human mind and the perception of one's true nature. Zen was taken to Japan in the 12th century by Isai. Its influence on Japanese art, attitudes, and language has been profound.
Zen Buddhism became very popular because it says that life is a fleeting phenomenon. And the samurai, when they went to war, they were never sure that they will come back. In this feeling, they go to war and there is no fear of death. So fearlessness in war was a very important contribution of the Zen tradition. And if you sit down, and when we sit down in a Zen monastery, you have to really do a very hard penance. And hard work in Japan is perfection. So it is the Zen tradition gave them a perfection in work, which became a very important part of the modern development, perfection in everything.
初めてインドに参りましたとき、
When I visited India for the first time, I made sure to visit places like Nalanda University, Bodh Gaya, and also the garden path trodden by the Shakyamuni himself. I felt happy to see the university where Tripitaka masters used to come and study during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD. Whatever Buddhism we practice now has its roots in India, and without Indians, there would be no Buddhism in Japan.
この仏教はなかったわけでありますから。
インドでも日本でも
So many deities are common in India and Japan, and people are worshipping them in both the countries.
共通しているということはまさしく
The hearts of the Indian people and the Japanese people have the same base.
つながっている一つの証ではないかと思います。
Japan is the one country where Buddhism is flourishing in all its facets. Here, technology and transcendence are living together. The deep-rooted spirit of Buddha's teachings energize the Japanese people. Buddhist temples are numerous, and vast numbers of people visit them every day. Besides the Buddha, so many ancient Indian deities and practices are preserved in these temples. An Indian feels quite at home in Japan.
I'm very grateful to Her Excellency Mrs. Chikage Suzuki for having kindly joined the screening. Very good of you. And my gratitude to Dr. Shobha Rani Dash of Kyoto, who so warmly helped in the making of this film. I would now request respected Dr. Karan Singh, who has been so kind to join us and who is the greatest expert that there is, the greatest authority that there is on Indian culture, to please give us his response to the film and the subject. Thank you so much, Dr. Karan Singh.
Thank you for yet another marvelous film. We've been making these films over the last 3 decades, and each one of them are quite extraordinary. We made films in the dark, we made films in silence, we made films in India, we made films all over South and Southeast Asia. And each one of them is an eye-opener because it shows tremendous depth of the impact of Indian culture in these countries. There is a common misconception that it is only Buddhism that went to the East and Far East from India. It's also Hinduism. And what Benoy has shown us in this film, these are all Hindu deities worshipped by the Japanese in their version of Sanskrit, which is lost in India. And it is quite extraordinary how he's shown us the worship of Indra and Garuna, for example, which is given up in India. And Saraswati, great goddess who is worshipped by all of us, is worshipped in Japan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karan Singh. It is very kind of you to have always encouraged me so much for, as you said, it has been perhaps it's been well more than 30 years now. Extremely kind of you. Thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, isn't it quite wonderful that there is a temple to Indra in Japan, in Tokyo, which is visited by large numbers of people. Varuna is worshipped, Vayu is worshipped, and that the Bija Aksharas of Sanskrit are considered sacred. They are held dearly and kept in the heart of the shrines of almost every home in Japan. What a marvelous sharing of culture. And what a marvelous and deep understanding of the ancient heritage. It's what a great courtesy which comes from the understanding and the following of ancient heritage. And best of all, as we can see, whether it was ancient India, which was so deeply cultured and at the same time enormously successful in its trade and commerce, or whether it has been Japan in the modern world, which is so immensely cultured and courteous and has shown great success in every walk of life. As a matter of fact, culture is, is what helps us be focused, to help us be disciplined, to help us to understand life, and therefore to be genuinely successful in every sense of the term. I think ancient India and present Japan have been great examples of this truth of life, which is before all of us. I would be very happy to answer any questions which you may have, and you may kindly put them in the chat box. And my thanks to Sushant for an excellent screening. Thank you.
Yeah, there are lots of comments and some questions. I'll start from the beginning. Narayanan Shankar has said superb, very nice, and very well made documentary. Congratulations. Can I have a link to get a recording of this program?
This program will be put up on YouTube on my channel, which is Benoy Behl. And if you also write to my email ID, which is benoy.behl@gmail.com, I could send you the direct link. Thank you.
Ramesh Subramaniam, this is an excellent documentary. I would like to show it to many more people. Is it available for such purposes?
Yes, it certainly is. If you would like it with my talk, we can look into the matter. Otherwise, it is available on YouTube on the Public Diplomacy channel, that is Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. So if you were to type in YouTube, if you were to type Indian deities worshipped in Japan, you would reach there. Thank you.
Sachin, very nice and informative. Though we are living in Japan, so many new things got to know. Thanks for the informative documentary.
I'm so glad that you liked it. Thank you.
Philippe Antoine Martinez, wow, magnificent documentary. Many thanks for sharing this. The impact of Indian culture on Japan is indeed not well known.
I'm so glad that you have enjoyed this. And yes, indeed, the impact of cultures and the sharing of cultures is such an important part of history. The warmth and sharing between peoples, the sharing of the meaning of life by people. I do wish this should be known more and more by everybody. And thank you so much.
All right. Great documentary film, very insightful. Thank you for sharing this with us. Congratulations to the team who made this masterpiece and organized this session.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that you liked it.
Alicia Bellianina, thank you so much for an opportunity to watch this beautiful and informative documentary. Absolutely enjoyed this insight into Japanese religious culture.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And my many thanks to all of you who are so kindly saying so many wonderful things about this film. It is very good of you. And I think since now the time will be short, if there are any questions, we'll address those. Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent film. Would it be possible to receive a shareable link? Hariharan.
Certainly, that would be possible if you were to write to me. And I'd be very happy to do that. Thank you.
Harry Hakui Kosato. I hope I pronounced it right. If I haven't, please forgive me. Thanks so much. Until today, I was under the impression that Zen Buddhism was born in Japan, but it seems that it came to Japan and was further developed in Japan. Is that correct? Thanks again.
Yes. In fact, it's quite marvelous to see the two main routes by which different ideas about Buddhism traveled from India to Japan. And Zen Buddhism, which traveled from India, along with Bodhidharma, who was most probably at Kanchipuram in Tamil Nadu on the eastern coast of India. And he took it to Southeast Asia and from there into Vietnam, where Bodhidharma remains the most revered deity with so many temples to him in Vietnam, most revered after the Buddha. And from there he went on and he took it to China, where this Dhyana Buddhism was called Chan Buddhism. And from there it went to Japan. And as a matter of fact, it's marvelous to see these different routes heading through China to Japan. If you look at the Lotus Sutra, it was from India, and who translated it? The initial translation, the popular translation, which remains till today the most beloved translation in China, was done by Kumarajiva in the 4th century. And who was Kumarajiva? Kumarajiva was a son of a Kashmiri Pandit, Kumarayana, who married the princess of Kucha. Her name was Jiva, and the child was named Kumara Jiva after their two names. And of course, then there is the other route, which also we have already touched upon, which is from Vietnam, from the Champa kingdom to Japan. And so many manuscripts, so many ideas, so many forms of art, perhaps dance forms, which survive till today in the royal repertoire of Japan, went to Japan from Champa kingdom. So it's quite marvelous to study these movements of ideas. Indeed, it is such a seeming miracle in the story of man, this warmth of the sharing of ideas. Thank you.
Hilda, can you comment on reasons for the attraction of Indian culture in Japan? And are there traces of Japanese culture in India?
I'm afraid I do not know of very meaningful traces of Japanese culture of the ancient period in India. And as for the attraction of Indian culture in Japan, you may like to look at the fact that that the ideas of Indian deities and philosophy were in fact very popular across the whole of Asia. If you look at other countries, if you look at Thailand, for instance, you will find that the king of Thailand is anointed king using Sanskrit Hindu rituals, and he considers himself to be a reincarnation of Vishnu, the Hindu deity. And of course, it's very important to observe that since the ancient period, there was no difference. There was no demarcated different religions of Hinduism or Buddhism or Jainism. From all that we know, from all the inscriptions that we know of ancient India, every family that we know about had somebody in it worshipping a Hindu deity, somebody worshipping a Buddha or a Jaina deity. So this idea that these are separate religions is a much later construct of the colonial period. So Indian culture, the philosophic ideas which stemmed from India were taken to heart, were warmly embraced across the whole of Asia. It has been marvelous for me to travel to very remote parts of China, for instance, Central Asian Buddhist caves and areas of China, and in so many of the countries of Southeast and South Asia, and to see how warmly these ideas have been received. And it's important also to understand that it was never the sword which initiated the spread of this culture. It was traders, Indian traders, and there's a great deal of trade from India. And when these traders, you can just imagine when the day's work is done and the traders are sitting around a campfire with local people outside the city, let us say, they would talk. And anybody who has known Indians knows that Indians talk a great deal about philosophy. And these ideas of life, which were heard by other people, seem to be the reason for this desire to know more and more about Indian philosophy and culture. And that is really the reason for the spread. It is a spread from the other side. It is a spread from the idea of people finding these ideas useful in their daily lives. The ideas to be useful in giving meaning to life, in the search for meaning in life. Thank you.
Do we have time? There are two more questions.
Yes, please.
One is from Padmanav Galgali. Can you please share a list of all of the temples in Japan? I would like to visit as many as possible of these temples in person along with my friends. As a member of Indian youth in Japan, it feels like it's now our prime responsibility to be aware of such a heritage.
Marvelous. In fact, I think that the coming together of the people of Japan and India to come to know each other and know themselves better would be so wonderful. To begin with, a list of all the temples who have cooperated with this exercise of making this film are in the acknowledgement of thanks in the end of this film. So if you could please take it from there, that would be one list that you would have. For the rest, there are a very large number of temples in Japan. And I think that both you and I would have to go on to the internet to do a search for those. And of course, it is the temples of Nara, and it is the temples of Kyoto, and it is Koyasan, and such centers of learning, which I would suggest that you put your focus on. And Tokyo, of course, Tokyo also has so many important and beautiful temples. But I wish you all the best in this exercise of coming to know Japan better. And in the process, I believe coming to know yourself and India much better. Because some of the best parts of Indian culture are so warmly preserved and shaped so beautifully in the Japanese way. I must say that the courtesy, the living courtesy of the Japanese people is something which you must learn more and more about and emulate. In the modern world today, Japan is such a luminous example of the finest of cultural values. Thank you.
We know the pure Buddhism has largely impacted daily life of the Japanese, probably religiously when Ashoka started sending messengers to spread it. How much do we know about the Hindu deities impacted their life? Why Hinduism could not flourish there?
As I mentioned before, in ancient India, there were no strictly divided religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. This was all a philosophic path. This was all a journey within to see in an ethical way what life is all about, to understand ourselves, to know what we are all about. And there are no distinctions, there are no divisions, and as you have seen, Saraswati is today worshipped much more in Japan, much more often in Japan, and there are many more temples to Saraswati in Japan. In fact, in India, it is difficult to find a temple to Saraswati, and so are all the other deities. The important thing is to understand that it is all very deeply philosophical. It is deeply logical, and it is a marvelous path towards the salvation that comes from a deep understanding. Knowledge is what it is all about. Thank you.
Narayan Shankar, people say Sanskrit is the most structured language in the world. Do the Japanese also feel the same?
The Japanese revere Sanskrit, and they, in fact, worship Sanskrit, the Sanskrit alphabet, which is actually worshipped and revered by the Japanese. So there is no greater appreciation of Sanskrit than that which you have in Japan. Thank you.
That's about all the questions that we have till now. Others were all comments, basically saying that they enjoyed the film. Announce the next film. It's going to be on February 18th. If you would like to please mark it on your calendars, we would love to have you with us. Same time, 6 p.m. on a Saturday. And the film this time is Poetry of the Hills. This is on the absolutely sublime paintings of Kangra miniatures. It's one of our personal favorites. So do please try to be there. I can guarantee that you will really enjoy it.
Thank you all very much. It's been an immense pleasure. My thanks once again to India Habitat Center and to the Ministry of External Affairs for having sponsored the making of this film. Thank you all.